What a difference a week makes. Week 4 of the NFL season is in the books. The Ravens, after a very questionable loss to the Indianapolis Colts, bounce back and pummel those Cleveland Browns 28-3. Welcome to the Ravens Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Njoku. Today we'll talk all about that big division rival win against those Cleveland Browns. We'll talk all about their upcoming matchup against the hated Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll have Bo Smolka in, talk all about that Ravens-Steelers game and look back about how the Ravens went ahead and demolished those Cleveland Browns. But first, let's get into it. The Ravens surprised me. You heard it here last week. I thought the Ravens were going to lose. I thought that Browns defense was going to be way too much for the offensive line. The patchwork that the coaching staff of the Baltimore Ravens did with that offensive line to get them together and stop Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith and company. Tall task, I thought. Boy, did I eat crow on Sunday. Oh, the Ravens looked magnificent. Magnificent, especially on defense. Now, there are some caveats. Obviously, Deshaun Watson did not play on Sunday. He was dealing with an injury. So DTR came in for the Browns and subbed in and didn't look great. Did not look good at all. And we know what the Ravens do against inexperienced quarterbacks. They feast. They feast. Jadeveon Clowney going against his old team and those Cleveland Browns was a force. Patrick Queen continues his stellar performance as a Ravens linebacker. Since the addition of Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen has looked completely different and more of the same on Sunday against those Cleveland Browns. So the defense came to play. No Marlon Humphrey, no Marcus Williams, no problem. Those guys stepped up. Amari Cooper, non-factor. 28-3. 28-3. I'm speechless. I'm rarely wrong. I don't like to say that I'm always right, but let's be serious, guys. For a long time, I'm rarely making mistakes with this. I totally did not see this coming, even with Deshaun Watson not playing. Now, I know there are Cleveland Browns fans out there saying, oh, well, Deshaun Watson didn't play. That's why the Ravens lost. That's why the Ravens won. No. Deshaun Watson was not going to do anything to combat that. I'm sure he would have got maybe a touchdown or two, but that was a complete butt whooping, courtesy of the Baltimore Ravens. So kudos to those guys. Of course, 28-3 means 4 touchdowns were scored, and that begins and ends with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, it's only been 4 weeks, but MVP? Question mark? Numero dos? He looked good. 2 touchdown passes, 2 rushing touchdowns as well. We'll talk all about that red zone offense when we get Bo Smolka on, but whew, the Ravens offense looking good. Now, we got to get into it because on social media, I was very intrigued by the style of offense the Ravens were running. Now, if you've been listening to me for weeks, I've been talking about how Todd Monken, his introduction to the system was going to change the fabric of how the Ravens play football. So I expect a lot of spread offense, exotic routes run by the receivers, just a totally different offense than we saw with Greg Roman. But that hasn't been the case. Now, I got in a little bit of trouble with the Ravens fans on social media when I mentioned that. Did the Ravens really need to fire Greg Roman? Especially in the red zone. Because for 4 scores straight, dating back to last week, red zone touchdowns, Lamar Jackson running in himself. Designed runs. A la Greg Roman. Now, there are some caveats to that, of course. The Ravens are motioning a lot of guys way more. The threat of the pass is greater, meaning that those defenders, the linebackers and the safeties and the corners have to step back some. They can't crowd the line of scrimmage like they used to. But more of the same to me. Same old. Of course, Todd Monken has come in and he's definitely changed the fabric of this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. A lot more screens, a lot more shots at the corner of the end zone. A la Mark Andrews later on in the game. Beautiful pass, by the way. But the Ravens are taking the Greg Roman approach in the red zone. They're not changing the fabric of the offense like I thought they were. They're building upon what Greg Roman did. They said, thank you for everything, Roman. We'll take it from here. I like this, I like this, I like this. Let's build on that. The red zone offense for the Ravens was scary even with Greg Roman. I know the numbers don't dictate that. They were a very poor to middle of the pack offense in the red zone. Not so much now. 80% conversion rates, tops in the league. So Todd Monken gets credit for that, but not the offense I was expecting in the red zone. Of course, OBJ is out. Rashad Bateman, not back yet. So to be determined what type of offense we see moving forward, but very interesting to say the least when it comes to this offensive attack in the red zone. I like it. I mean, it's working. You can't guard everybody. Pick your poison. So far, the DBs of opposing defenses have chosen to lock up on those receivers and tight ends. Well, your loss. Lamar Jackson runs it in. I love it. I like it. I like it. You had two choices. Build upon the offense or start anew. I thought it was going to be start anew. Not so much, at least so far in 2023. But more about this game because, again, I am astonished how the Ravens attacked the Browns. Now, some of it is, of course, as you mentioned, Deshaun Watson did not play. Okay? So the offense of the Browns was stagnant. And that's being nice. They were awful. Pretty bad. So the defense of the Browns was on the field a lot more. They got tired. The Browns defense reminds me a lot of the 2006 Ravens defense. Very, very aggressive. Very proud. They know that they're very talented, so they use that to their advantage. And of course, Myles Garrett got to the quarterback. It wasn't like he was a no-show. But as the game progressed, even as close as the second quarter, you saw those guys get tired. The aggression took a back seat. The Ravens used screens and, misdirection to try and take advantage of the aggression of the front four. And as the game went along, the Browns realized they couldn't do that. So they stepped it back a little bit. And the Ravens took advantage. 28-3. My goodness. Great job by the coaching staff, especially after I criticized them a great deal in week 3 for their performance against the Indianapolis Colts. I didn't think they got the team ready. I think that this was a trap game that came at them in week 3 at home. I didn't like it. Very critical. So I have to give the coaching staff their flowers. The players performed, but the coaching staff deserves all the credit. The Browns defense, everyone thought it was going to be a low-scoring game. Everybody thought that the Browns was going to come in, do what they had to do on defense, and as long as Deshaun Watson got a touchdown or two, it was the Browns' victory. Nope. 28-3, guys. I think the Browns were 2.5, 3.5 point favorites, depending on where you went. They lost by 25. This is the team that I'm talking about that is going to potentially fight their way into a Super Bowl. They're my pick. I picked them to win it, the Baltimore Ravens. And this is how you do it. The defense, of course, we talked about it earlier, but I'm going to shift back to them. I was very much a critic of the cornerbacks. No Marlon Humphrey. Marcus Williams gone. You got guys that we haven't even heard of. Rocket Sim came in from the Raiders. We didn't know what we were going to expect with them. Brandon Stevens, a guy who gets some hate for some reason. I'm not really sure why the fans dislike Brandon Stevens so much, but he's a solid corner. Not everybody's going to be Marlon Humphrey. Not everybody's going to be Jimmy Smith. Not everybody's going to be Chris McAllister. Brandon Stevens has come a long way, plays me into the starting role, and Coach Harbaugh mentioned that he's staying in the corner for sure, but don't be surprised if when Marlon Humphrey gets healthy, you have Rocket Sim on one side, Brandon Stevens on the other, and Marlon Humphrey in that nickel. Very impressive in the cornerback group. So kudos to the Ravens staff once again. Great job by the defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, of course. He might not be a DC for very long. Keep playing like this. You know the old mantra in Baltimore. Fans know. If you're a defensive coordinator in Baltimore and you do good, you're not a DC for very long. So the Ravens might be on a hiring search pretty soon if that defense continues to play the way they have. So the Ravens get it done 28-3. They move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Huge, huge, huge game. Why? Not just because it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not just because the Ravens are 3-1 and looking to be 4-1 and atop the division, but because if they were to beat the Steelers in week 5, Bengals, Browns, Steelers, on the road, victories, 5 weeks into the season is unheard of. The Ravens are in the fast lane to that division title if they get the job done. I just wish they got the job done against the Indianapolis Colts. Ooh-wee. They'd be 4-0, coming in 5-0. But, things happen. I'm going to move on from that because I still get a little agitated because the Ravens weren't playing to their best ability in week 3, but it happens early in the season. You want to play that way in the beginning than later on, for sure. The Ravens will tell you that. But they have a chance, if they get this job done against the Pittsburgh Steelers, to be miles ahead of the competition as the season rolls around. So, huge game. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk all about it, but we're going to get Bo Smolka in to mention it, go over it, decipher it, dice it up, and I hope you guys tune in. We'll have him up next. This is the Ravens Talk Podcast. Welcome back to the Ravens Talk Podcast. We have with us Bo Smolka, who's the beat writer for the Baltimore Ravens for PressBox. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, long time, but we finally got you in. I've been trying to get you in for about a month or so, and, the stars finally aligned.
I know. Something always came up. Sorry about that.
No worries. Glad to have you on finally. And what better time? It's Steelers week. Biggest night of the year, or second biggest. I guess the biggest would be when the Steelers come to town, but the Ravens are going on the road to battle the Steelers. But before we get into that, let's focus on the Browns game because I'm so shocked that the Ravens were able to not only beat the Browns, but the manner in which they did. It was a complete domination. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think it had more to do with the fact that Deshaun Watson didn't play, or are you in the camp that I am in which it doesn't matter who was on the field, the Ravens are going to pick up the W?
Well, there's one thing here, and I wrote about this after the game. Yes, Deshaun Watson didn't play, and that clearly affected what the Browns could do. But when the Ravens were gashing that Browns defense, Deshaun Watson would have been on the sideline anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think the most impressive part of that game was the 2 second quarter drives the Ravens had when they just took it right to the Browns. 73 and maybe 74 yards, just sustained drives.
Yeah.
One after another. And that was something the Browns hadn't had happen to them all season. So, yes, Deshaun Watson didn't play, but Deshaun Watson would not have been on the field for that anyway. And to me, the most impressive thing was the way the Ravens offense was able to move that ball, especially in that second quarter against that Browns defense.
Yeah. So I agree completely with you on that. And I wonder what they did different. Did you see anything on the field that the Ravens did that other teams didn't do? Or was it more of like, we're a running football team. We're a power running style team. We're going to put it down the defense's throats and stop us if you can.
Well, one thing that struck me right away was, I think in the Ravens' first 5 or 6 plays, they threw 2 passes to Gus Edwards. And I think one of them might have gotten called back. But Gus Edwards is not a guy that catches a lot of passes. And that told me their plan all along was, we're going to get the ball out quick, which they've been doing all year with Todd Monken, and we're going to kind of negate these pass rushers. We didn't have Ronnie Stanley, so you're already down a left tackle. Let's get the ball out quick. And if that doesn't work, and they want to attack us on the edge, then we're going to attack them inside, and those guys can run around us. And I know Myles Garrett will line up the middle sometimes, he'll line up on the edge sometimes, but I thought they were able to move the ball in different ways, and to his credit, Lamar Jackson executed. He made a beautiful pass to Melvin Gordon down the sideline, and of course the touchdown pass to Mark Andrews. John Harbaugh called as good a pass as you'll ever see, and he lofted that ball over three defenders to where only Mark Andrews could catch it. So those were big plays by Lamar Jackson, but conceptually, it seemed they wanted to negate the pass rush however they could. Whether that was quick passes before the rushers could get there, or if they want to attack from the outside, we're going to try to go up and inside with Gus Edwards.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you said because the Ravens, especially on the red zone, are performing very well. Now, there's some gorgeous idiot on social media who said that the Ravens shouldn't have really gotten rid of Greg Roman because they're running the ball in the red zone, very similar to how they did under Roman. But I think that most fans will agree that this has been a completely different style of offense than they had under the Roman era. Did you see anything in the red zone over the past couple of weeks that is different than what we may have seen in previous seasons? Have the Ravens really dialed it up and changed things up?
Well, they scored. That's one thing that's different. They scored touchdowns. I just feel like they executed better than they sometimes did last year. And I can't point out to a specific play or a specific time or what, but it just seems they're crisper. And someone suggested that maybe their whole rhythm is better and they're not rushed to the line of scrimmage and they're not they're not rushing and everything's more controlled. And that might affect your efficiency. But that's what they are right now. They're just efficient. They get down. The Browns had not given up a red zone touchdown all year. The Ravens, and not only a few chances, mind you, but they hadn't. And the Ravens got down there 4 times and scored all 4. And again, it was Lamar Jackson running it in a couple times, and that's certainly still for all the revamped offense, Lamar Jackson running is still one of their best plays. And he scored. Actually, he's now has 4 rushing touchdowns, I believe, this year. 2 more in this game. We saw what he can do on that quarterback draw. He improvises and he finds the hole. He reads the defense and he goes. So that's one. And then he just made good throws. I just think they're executing better than they did before. And I don't know if that's a part of just feeling more in control. I feel sometimes we saw, they're getting the playoff with 1 or 0.1 second left on the play clock over and over again last year.
Yeah. It
feels more in control and they're executing well right now.
Yeah. And if it's not broke, don't fix it. The Ravens look like they built upon what they had in their previous system and it's paying great dividends. They're number 1 in the league in red zone scoring. So that's great. Let's move on to the defense because that defense was much maligned, especially in the secondary because of big losses to Marcus Williams and Marlon Humphrey. But so far, so good. Brandon Stephens looks to be coming into his own. But before we get into the cornerbacks, let's talk about the linebacker group. Patrick Queen still building upon his previous success in the middle of last season when they brought in Roquan Smith. That 1-2 combo is paying great dividends.
Oh, they sure are. And I mean, I know we talked about it last year too. Patrick Queen just got a lot better when Roquan Smith got here. Everything got better. The defense got better and Patrick Queen definitely got better. Patrick Queen has been sensational. And I said to somebody else, it's not just in this game or it's been since July. And I give Patrick Queen a lot of credit because the team basically came up to him and said, we're not giving him a 5th-year option. Maybe we'll work on this after the season, but we're not paying you right now. And you will figure the rest out later and you'll figure the rest out later. And it would be easy for a player to kind of turn it off or pout and not turn it off, but pout and be upset about that. I mean, you've just been told by your organization that we might move on for you after the season. We're not going to pay that to you. And all Patrick Queen has done is put his head down and grind and play really, really hard and really, really well. So he has been terrific from the first day of training camp right through now. And Roquan Smith, I remember when Eric DeCosta said when we asked him about him when they traded for him, he said he's a force multiplier. He makes everybody better. And that is so true. And look, Roquan Smith will, as we saw, he will provide the bulletin board material. He'll say what he wants to say, and he will back it up. He's great for this. He's going to be great for the Steelers-Ravens rivalry, but he's just so energetic, and he's so good. And so yeah, those two in the middle of that defense, it feels like old-school Ravens defense built from the inside linebackers out.
Yeah, and I was a huge Patrick Queen critic, especially because of the amount of value that was obtained with that first-round draft pick, picking him up. But, man, he has turned heads, including mine, and he's put the Ravens in quite a bind in the offseason because they're going to want to try and keep him. He's a stellar linebacker. So let's move on because you mentioned it. The Pittsburgh Steelers are coming to town. Well, we're going to Pittsburgh, and Roquan Smith's a big part of that with this trash talk and really rallying the troops a la the old days of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. The Steelers haven't looked good so far this season. I know they picked up a win against the Browns when Nick Chubb went down, but that offense is looking stagnant. Even with that, do you see this rivalry taking shape on the field? Do you see a similar dogfight between these two teams?
I mean, I never want to dismiss it because this rivalry is what it is, and the games tend to be just complete bloodbaths. We know Pittsburgh's got a really good defense, and those guys, Watt, Highsmith, these guys are going to come after Lamar Jackson, and we don't know what the status is of Morgan Moses yet, but the Ravens could be down at least one, maybe two starting offensive tackles, which is a daunting proposition against that defense. But the Steelers' offense right now is a mess, and I have a lot of good friends in Pittsburgh, and they're kind of beside themselves with it right now. Canada, the offense coordinator, is getting just getting hammered in Pittsburgh. But now Kenny Pickett's hurt, so he won't be playing, and it'll be Mitch Trubisky. Ravens have seen Mitch Trubisky a couple times. Mitch Trubisky, you may remember, was one of the only rookie quarterbacks to beat a John Harbaugh team in Baltimore. He came in with the Bears team and beat the Ravens in something of a shocker. But the Ravens have seen Trubisky. If Trubisky's the one to run the offense, this Pittsburgh offense right now does not have its legs. And I think that the Ravens are getting them at a good time. Having said that, though, we saw what they can do. They scored defensive touchdowns against Cleveland. And Lamar Jackson, you might recall, has not historically played well against Pittsburgh. Nope. He gave up pick six here in Baltimore, I think on the first play of the game one year. I don't have his numbers in front of me right now, but I am almost positive his quarterback rating against Pittsburgh is significantly lower than against any other team he's played. So defensive touchdowns could absolutely be in play again for Pittsburgh, and that's a concern. They're really good defensively. But the Ravens are getting this team at a good time. I expect it to be a low-scoring AFC North slog because I think points, yardage are going to be hard to come by on both sides.
Yeah, and that's the thing that intrigued me about that Browns game because the Steelers and Browns have a very comparable front four, and I thought that with the shortcomings that Lamar Jackson have had against the Steelers, that will rear its head with the Browns, but not to be. So I think that there's a chance that you're right, that there could be a slugfest between these two teams. But if they show out the way they did against the Browns, it might get ugly for the Steelers. So who knows? We'll see. Let's talk a little bit about, you said Matt Canada is in trouble in Pittsburgh. And it's very similar to how the Ravens came after, not the Ravens, the Ravens fans came after Greg Roman all those years. Mike Tomlin sounded like he was going to make a change, but I haven't heard anything of it yet. Do you think if the Ravens were to slaughter the slaughter the Steelers, in which they did with the Browns, that a change could be coming? I mean,
there's the drums are beating in Pittsburgh over this, right? And excuse me. And if it doesn't get better, they probably will have to make a change because they're looking around, and you get a little deeper into a season where you feel like you start to run out of chances. You got to build some momentum, and it's clearly not trending in the right direction for that offense right now. And now they've lost the quarterback. It's hard. I asked someone else. I mean, they feel like they're not even sure whether Kenny Pickett's the guy yet, but because it's been so inconsistent and so incomplete, and now he's hurt, so you still don't know. And so there's a lot of offensive issues there. And yeah, it is in a way like Greg Roman, right? The offensive coordinator is going to be kind of the whipping boy when the offense doesn't work right. But that's the guy's job. As Todd Monken said to us, my job here is to score points. Right. I've got to score points. How we do it, we'll figure it out. But my job is to score points. And Matt Canada's job with that offense is to score points, and Pittsburgh's not doing enough of it. I've always been a big Mike Tomlin fan. I get in arguments with Ravens fans all the time about this. I love Mike Tomlin. Same. If there's my Pittsburgh friends say if there's one criticism of Tomlin, it's that sometimes he's just too loyal to these assistants, or he doesn't always hire the right assistants, or whatever it is. But Tomlin, you cannot knock what he's done in terms of always having a winning record with this team. Now he's got some work to do this year because, like I said, they're in a way right now, and I think the Ravens are getting them at a good time. So if the Ravens were to go in there and win 28-3 like they did here in Cleveland, I think there will really be some howling in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and you mentioned the loyalty that Mike Tomlin has, and it reminds me a lot about John Harbaugh. It's one of the reasons why I like both Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh so much, because they stick to their guns. But you're right. If this offense in Pittsburgh continues to falter, Mike Tomlin might have no choice but to make a change. Now, you mentioned that the dogfight is coming in Pittsburgh. I want to get your predictions. Who do you think is going to win? And if there's one or two players that you think will show out against that Pittsburgh Steelers team?
I'll take the Ravens. I'll take the Ravens like 20-16. I just don't see a lot of scoring. And that very well may be a defensive touchdown along the way for Pittsburgh. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So I'll say 20-16 Ravens. If X factor type in this game, I'm not sure. I'm still waiting for Zay Flowers to get that first touchdown. And he's I've been a big Zay Flowers fan from the first time he got here. You mentioned Brandon Stevens. We could just talk about him for 1 second.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is a guy who has really, really, really been an important part of this first 4 games. I mean, remember, Marlon Humphrey goes out, and at one point they thought Jalen Armour-Davis might be a starter. He's been hurt all the time. Brandon Davis, when they signed Brandon Stevens, when they drafted him, he had been a college cornerback, but the Ravens all along saw him as a safety in the NFL. He played safety in OTAs. We saw him out there as a safety. Mm-hmm. But then these cornerbacks start dropping, and they tell Stevens, hey, do you think you can go back out and play corner? We kind of need you at cornerback. And he's been really good. He was very physical with Jamar Chase and the Bengals. He really disrupted that offense. And he's just been a big player at the right time for that team so far. So I think in terms of all this other defensive talk, Brandon Stevens should get some credit for what he's done.
1,000%. And I definitely did forget to mention that because I wanted to ask you, when Marlon Humphrey returns, with Brandon Stevens playing at such a high level and Rocket Sim being brought in to really play opposite Marlon, do you see the chance that maybe they bring in Brandon Stevens really to play it outside and use Marlon Humphrey where he's most effective, which is inside? Well,
that's an interesting thing. They're going to have to figure out. I mean, it'll be a nice problem to have because I also think they want to have Geno Stone and Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton all on the field together.
Yep.
And we saw what Kyle Hamilton can do in the slot. He had those 3 sacks against Indianapolis, and he can really be disruptive there. So do you play Humphrey in the slot and then Stevens outside and maybe either with Stevens on the other side, Humphrey inside? Are there times when Humphrey's outside with one of the other cornerbacks and Kyle Hamilton's in the slot with Williams and Stone deep at safety? There will be a good problem to have when all these players back. We thought Marcus Williams might play last week. He practiced late in the week, but then he was inactive. We might see him this week. I'm still not sure when we'll see Humphrey. He hasn't started practicing, so I would expect if we see him on the practice field this week, I still don't think we'll see him play this week. But when they do get Humphrey back, yeah, I think he's well suited to play inside, but as I said, so is Kyle Hamilton. And the way Geno Stone's playing, there are going to be times they want all 3 of the safeties on the field together too. So Mike McDonald, when he gets them all together, if he ever gets them all together, we'll have a lot of options.
Man, the secondary, everyone thought would be the huge Achilles of this team, and it's now one of its biggest strengths. It's crazy how the National Football League works. Well, thank you so much, Bo, for joining us. Finally got you in, and you've been a great guest here.
Yeah, you did.
Let me get the people at home to hear where you get your stuff.
Sure. I'm at PressBox, Baltimore-based PressBox. That's PressBoxOnline.com. So recaps after every game. I'll be out at Pittsburgh on Sunday. And it's funny, you mentioned the Pittsburgh game on Sunday and all the buzz. It's so interesting that the same day the Ravens are playing the Steelers, the Orioles are hosting Game 2 of the American League Division Series. So for an October Pittsburgh Steelers-Ravens game, I can't believe the level of buzz won't be it will be as low as I can ever remember because you got the Orioles and the playoffs the same day at home.
My gosh.
I'm at PressBoxOnline.com, so we'll have recaps of the game. I've got feature stories in the print issue every month or so, and I'm on Twitter at BSMOLKA, where I also update Ravens stuff daily.
Yeah, I follow you, and you always got the good stuff. That's why I always retweet your stuff.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're a great beat writer for PressBox and covering those Ravens. So much appreciated. Thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to having you back on the show very soon.
All right, you bet. I'll do it again. My pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks. That's Bo Smolka with PressBox. When we get back, we'll recap everything we talked about and get my predictions for what we're going to have happen with the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers. This is the Ravens Talk Podcast. Welcome back to the Ravens Talk Podcast. That was Bill Smolka with PressBox. He had all the goods as far as the Ravens and Steelers game is concerned. We're going to go ahead and talk about what my predictions are, because the Ravens and Steelers rivalry is a tale as old as time. It's my favorite time of year, honestly. Doesn't have quite the buzz, no Ben Roethlisberger, no Terrell Suggs, no Ray Lewis, no Ed Reed, no Hines Ward, no Bus, not Gus the Bus, but Jerome Bettis, who some may call the original Bus. So it's lost a little bit of luster, and now we have Kenny Pickett, who may not play, and Mitch Trubisky, who Bo mentioned, came back and beat us when he was with the Bears, but doesn't feel the same. But so it really is about the Ravens, Steelers, and Ravens fans and Steelers fans going at it, I should say. It's all about that, really. And that's really what it's all about to me. So I'm excited about it. And as Bo mentioned, the Orioles are playing during that time period as well. So big buzz in Baltimore right now. But as far as my predictions, I predicted the Ravens to lose to the Browns. I will not make that mistake again. No, sirree. Not me. Mentioned it to Bo. He didn't really feel the same way I did about the outcome, but the TJ Watt situation had me a little worried. But what they did with the Myles Garrett had me thinking the Ravens are going to be okay. They'll have a plan in place. They'll do what they need to do. They'll neutralize TJ Watt. They'll have plays designed to run away from him. And the Steelers are going to have to rely on their offense, really, to keep their defense out of the field. Because if the Ravens do what they did against the Browns to them, it's going to be another tough outing. I don't think it's going to be 28-3. Let's say 27-17. 27-18, just to be weird. I don't think I've ever heard that score before. So let's go 27-18. That's my thought process on that. I think the Ravens are going to move on to 4-1. They better. If they do, they're in very good shape as the season progresses. Very, very good shape indeed. Before I let you go, I want to talk about the Baltimore Orioles. I know this is the Ravens Talk Podcast, but oh my goodness, my Baltimore Orioles, first place in the AL East, number 1 seed in the playoffs. The American League playoffs will run through Baltimore, Maryland. That's right. And as of this recording, those Tampa Bay Rays lost to the Texas Rangers. So if you're a Rays fan, you're worried. It's the best of 3 series. The Orioles' biggest competition may be out before the ALDS gets underway. So I'm very excited. So Orioles baseball, Ravens football. Ravens are 3-1, looking to go 4-1. Orioles are chilling, relaxing. They're in Ann Arbor, grabbing some drinks and just watching the rest of the AL tear themselves apart, get rested. So shout out to those Orioles fans who've waited patiently for their team to finally succeed. It's been a long and hard wait, but if the Orioles can get this World Series title, it will be worth it. That's my little shindig. I know it's a Ravens Talk Podcast, but it's my show and I love the Orioles, and I know most of you out there do too. So big shout out to those Orioles. Congratulations on a successful season and good luck in the playoffs. That's going to do it here for the Ravens Talk Podcast. Ravens have a chance to go 4-1, lead the division, beat all 3 division opponents on the road. We'll see if they can get it done. I'd also like to mention that I will be at the Crab Corner in Las Vegas on October 8th for that Ravens Steelers game. Pre-game and post-game show will be happening there at that restaurant. I'll mention it in my Instagram and my Twitter. I've been down there. It smells delicious. It smells like Baltimore. So if you're in the Las Vegas area and you want to watch those Ravens beat down on those Pittsburgh Steelers, come join me at the Crab Corner at 9:30 a.m. Right before the Ravens take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, that'll do it here for the Ravens Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Njoku. Enjoy the games, Orioles and Ravens. Hopefully they can both pick up the W. I'll see you next week.